Hey everybody, today we're thinking healthy and we're going to cook some asparagus. I saw this in the grocery store and it looked so young and tender, and I have a couple of tips for you. So stay with me because I think you'll really appreciate the tips that I have for you today, and you can use it with other things that you're cooking as well. So let's get started and cook this asparagus. Okay, so we have our asparagus, and I have a knife here, and that's all that I'm needing right now. It's a cutting board and a knife. So I'm just going to take a few pieces at the time, and I'm going to cut off this tough end. Now, I'm cutting off about a little over an inch, so you can decide how much of that is tough. And one of the tips that I want to share with you today is that you can do one of two things with this that you're cutting off. And some of you may have some other suggestions as well. But I like to throw it, that feels tough. So I'm just going to move it up just a hair more. So I'm just cutting it so that we'll have tender asparagus. What I wanted to tell you, or what I started to tell you, and I got sidetracked, imagine that. You can throw this in a pot, the ends that you're cutting off, wash it and throw it in a pot and make some broth, some vegetable broth, and use that in soup or anything else as far as that goes that you're cooking. So that is tip number one. Tip number two is that that's cutting tough. I'm just going to go a little bit higher. We don't want any tough asparagus that we're going to be roasting in the oven. We want it to be young and we want it to be tender. And here I go again getting sidetracked. But the other tip, or one of the other tips that I wanted to share with you, is that once you cut this, then you want to take it over to the sink and wash it. And if you're in a hurry and you haven't had time to plan ahead and start working on this ahead of time, then you can take a paper towel and dry it as best you can. You don't want to have moisture in your roasted asparagus. When you put it in the oven, you don't want any moisture to come out. You want it to be crisp. That one right there is tough. I can tell that it is. You want it to be crisp. So you can just wash it and take a paper towel and dry it off. Or you can, if you have plenty of time, you can take this young, tender asparagus over to the sink. You can wash it, lay out a paper towel or a clean cloth, and just spread it out and let it air dry. But you do want to wash it, and you want it to be as dry as possible before we start prepping it to put in the oven to roast. I am preheating my oven to 425 degrees, and now we need to prepare our pan. Today I'm using a baking sheet that has a little lip on it, and I have cut a piece of parchment paper to fit the pan. I'm going to lay that aside because I have another tip for you. Anytime that you are using parchment paper, you know how it just kind of moves around, slides around on your pan? Well, the way to keep that from happening is to take some solid shortening, and you can use any kind that you want to. I happen to be using Crisco, which I love, and I just place a solid shortening on my pan and just kind of rub it in, just like that. And this will create a suction, and your parchment paper will stick to your pan and it won't move around and slide around. So that's my other tip for you today. So now I'm just going to place the parchment paper back in the pan. I'm going to use my hands, press it down, and you can probably see the oil from the Crisco there. And so there you have it. See, it doesn't slide around. So now we're ready to prepare our asparagus to place on this parchment paper. I have washed and dried our asparagus. Remember, I tell you how important it is to wash and to completely dry your asparagus, because anytime that you put it in the oven, it's going to draw water out of it. So now I'm just placing it in this Ziploc bag, and we'll add our other ingredients. So remember to make sure that you dry your asparagus. Now I'm going to put about 4 to 5 tablespoons of olive oil, and this is extra light flavor. And I'm not going to measure it. I'm just going to pour it in. And I think that's enough. If it's not, we'll add a little bit more. So we've added that. Next, I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of garlic powder. So I'm just adding that, sprinkling that in on the asparagus. And I will move those. Now, we're just going to take our hands and we're just going to roll this around, mixing this around. We just want to make sure that there's oil on all of the asparagus. So, and I can see it. I think I need a little bit more on the tips. So let me grab that and I'll pour a little bit toward the tips right here. Just a little bit more right in there. We want to make sure that all of the asparagus is covered. So now I'm just going to roll that around. And I'll bring our pan back over that we have lined with this parchment paper that's staying in place beautifully. And now we want to just place our asparagus on the parchment paper. Now, this is important. You want to spread it out as evenly as you can and separate it so that each piece of asparagus will become crisp and will cook, and that's why I'm using this larger pan. So we're just spreading it out. We preheated our oven to 425 degrees. You want to cook it in a hot oven. And now I'm going to add some kosher salt. And this is to taste, and remember I'm trying to cut back a little bit. So I'm just going to put some in my hand, and I'm just going to kind of sprinkle it over the asparagus, just like that. Okay, that's good. Now, if you want to add black pepper, you can add ground black pepper. If you want to, I'm just going to add a little bit of pure ground black pepper. So I'm just going to sprinkle that over. And this is ready to go in the oven. I'll roast it for 10 to 15 minutes and we'll look at it. Our asparagus cooked for 15 minutes in the oven on 425. I took it out of the oven and plated it, and now it's ready to eat. Doesn't it look delicious? Okay, friends, that's how we make oven roasted asparagus at home with the Halsteads. Thank you for joining me today. Tell me in the comments if you even eat asparagus. I know everybody doesn't love it, but it's so healthy and it makes a great side dish to go with almost any kind of meat. I love you, and I'll see you again really, really soon.